Hello guys, good morning, and listen, I want to talk China. I'm going to try to put this in my own words so you guys can understand better what's really going on in China. Now, you know that China claims to have 6.7% GDP growth every year, year on year. Well, first off, you got the Chinese Communist Party. This is like a legacy that's left over from Mao. I'm going to tell you what. Here's the thing. Picture the Chinese party, the Central Core, as like a center unit, like the center of a hub of a wheel, and these spokes that come out from the wheel are all the different corporations and stuff that are connected to the Chinese party system. This is the way it works. Well, money comes out from that center hub and feeds all these spokes that come out from the wheel. Many, many, many different spokes. These are Chinese state-owned corporations and stuff. Okay? Now, that is done completely differently than it's done over here in the West. Over here in the West, when we have a corporation, if a corporation starts to not produce enough product or whatever, and they're not selling enough of whatever they're selling, and they start to get in financial trouble, what happens is they go under. They basically, but what happens in China is these corporations are attached to these spokes that come off of the center hub. So it's like a circulatory system in a body, and the money being fed like blood to keep these corporations and stuff going. So the Chinese government, the party in China, the central party, the central hub, they've been borrowing roughly about $3 trillion a year to keep all this going. And one of the things that's been sucking all this money from them is something called the Chinese shadow banking system. Now, I'm going to try to describe to you how this actually works in my own words. After the crisis of 2008, what's been really keeping the whole world economy afloat for a long time there is the Chinese, and their amazing growth. And everybody thinks, okay, wow, the Chinese economy's booming, everything's great and everything. Well, let me explain it to you this way. Picture a race, a foot race. Say it's a marathon, okay? And on the sidelines toward the finish line, near the finish line of the marathon, you've got an old lady sitting there in a wheelchair. Say she's smoked all her life. She's got emphysema, She's got an oxygen tank. She can't even get out of the wheelchair and walk 10 feet. She's sick and everything else. They've pushed her to the race so she can watch the finish of the race. Okay? And she's in very poor health. Okay? This is Italy. Okay? That's Italy. Now, China is the runner who's run 26 miles in the marathon. Had a big pizza dinner the night before. And all the cameras are focused on him, and he's the champion, and he's running into the race, and he's coming toward the finish line. And they're saying, oh, look at the Chinese economy, it's amazing. And look at this runner, he's amazing. And he's finishing the race in first place, and he's such a healthy candidate, and he's such a wonderful, everything's wonderful, right? And this guy is amazing. He's run 26 miles and he's not even winded. Okay, 10 meters, 50 feet before he finished the finish line, all of a sudden he falls over on the ground, flat in his face. And the camera reporters all come running in. And the doctors all come running in. And the doctors come running over and they put their hand on his neck. We can't feel a pulse. They turn him over. Quick, bring in the paddles. They bring in paddles and put on his chest. Boom. And somebody starts doing CPR. 5 minutes later, they come in and they say, he's dead. His heart quit. Now that old lady sitting in the chair, sitting over there still watching, her heart's still beating. Okay? This is what China's like. Because China's got internal problems that you can't see. And one of the big internal problems is the shadow banking system. And how that's connected in with the real estate system. So when everybody's watching China and everybody's saying, oh, look at China economy, 6.7% growth year over year and all this kind of stuff. And oh, it's booming and everything, right? Well, you guys better watch the Baltic Dry Index. And you better watch what Trump is doing, because I'm going to start to connect dots for you right now, what's really going on in China. The shadow banking industry, what they do is, and this is what they've done. I watched a documentary on this a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, but they've been keeping it going, like I say, with this 3-point-something trillion a year that they've been injecting from that center hub. They've been keeping all of that's like a circulatory system. In other words, they've been feeding it with blood. They've been with money being the blood. Now, I'm trying to put this into my own words so you can understand what's going on. But they've also been feeding this shadow banking system and actually keeping it going. $7 trillion shadow banking system in China. But it's interconnected to the real estate. Now, here's what happens. I'll give you an example of how this shadow banking system is done. They sell something to the Chinese people that's called wealth management products. And they go in and they set up what I would call a facade. It's almost like what happens when you have a movie in Hollywood, when they have a movie set, like they're going to make a Western, a Western movie. And what they'll do is they'll build the front of all the buildings. They'll build the front of the saloon, and they'll build the front of the hotel, and they'll build the front of everything. But behind it, it's just the front. There's no building in behind it. It's a movie set. In behind it, there's just a board propping up the front of the building. It's like a flat wall, and there's nothing behind it. This is what the shadow banking system is like. They go in and they'll affiliate themselves with maybe a big Western bank. Like, there's big Western banks like, I'm not going to say that Deutsche Bank's involved in this, but they might affiliate themselves with a bank like Deutsche Bank, or we'll just use them for instance. They'll set up a bank, say they'll call it Shenzhen Bank, or something like that, a Chinese name, and they'll affiliate themselves. That bank, in other words, is now affiliated with the big Western bank. And this gives them clout, gives the people look and they say, oh, this new Shenzhen Bank, it's affiliated with Deutsche Bank, and, it's big, and everything. And then what they do is they go in and they create this facade, like a movie set, almost like you would see with a Hollywood Western. They'll go in and they'll buy trucks and everything, and they'll start building a bridge or something. And they'll have Shenzhen Corporation all over their suits and on their trucks and everything. So people drive by and they'll put commercials on TV. And the Chinese people say, oh, this is a big corporation. And they're doing all kinds of mergers and work and everything else. But really all it is a facade. There's nothing really there. What it's really about is selling the Chinese people these wealth management products. So what they do is they sell the first wealth management products to the first Chinese investors. And they come in and they buy them readily. And then after a year goes by, they pay them a high percentage of interest. And they pay out. Okay? But what they're doing is the new investor money that's coming in, they're using that to pay off the original investors. And word goes out to the Chinese people and say, oh, great, well, this wealth management product, I'm making all kinds of money, they tell their buddies. And then their buddies come in and invest. And then their buddies comes in and invest. And this Shenzhen Corporation, or whatever they want to call it, I'm just making that name up out of thin air. But this is happening multiple times through China in the shadow banking system. Takes in all of these huge amounts of money. And so they do these projects, and they don't care what the projects are. It could be a bridge to nowhere, or it could, oftentimes what the project actually is is to go out into a farmer's field and build a giant high-rise building. Okay? That's generally what the project is. And then they sell those buildings that they just created to more investors. Because, see, the Chinese people, they can't invest in anything mostly but real estate and savings. Their government has limited them in what they can invest in. For a little while there, they were investing in Bitcoin. They drove it up to like $1,200. And then the Chinese banking system, the People's Bank of China, decided to clamp down. And we saw a huge fall in the price of Bitcoin when that happened. But that was a while back. But they had to stop them. They had to cut them off. They were starting to invest in other things other than real estate, which invests back into the shadow banking system, or savings, basically. So this is the only place they can put their money. And for all those good years, when the central core, the hub, was feeding the money out, $3 trillion a year, that money was being reinvested in China, in infrastructure and into the shadow banking system, which is now about more or less, see, I'm just not giving you exact numbers, but more or less around $7 trillion is shadow banking system. Okay? But how it functions is it creates all of this real estate. Oftentimes the shadow banking system reinvests the money in creating infrastructure projects or real estate. And then they resell that real estate at high prices in some of these really the nicer cities in China. And they've got the real estate prices up so high that there's tremendous money involved here. All of it. The shadow banking system, the real estate ventures, the wealth management products, all of it is actually a Ponzi scheme. So where are we now, sitting in this situation in China? We're sitting in the situation where about 25%, 20 to 25% of all of the people living in China. Now, you know, there's a lot of people in China. There's like over 1 billion people, and they have to have a place to live. So a lot of the houses are occupied. But an awful lot of these real estate ventures, which makes up about 20 to 25% of the real estate in China, is empty. But that's the investment properties. That's the shadow banking system. That's what they did with all of that money that was brought in through these wealth management products and everything else. And now what's happened is this whole thing has blossomed to the point where it's a ginormous bubble ready to pop. So now China, in order to keep all this going, like I say, they've been borrowing like $3 trillion a year, which, by the way, is the equivalent of pretty much all the Federal Reserve did during 10 years of quantitative easing. So you can start to see that the United States of America is not near as much trouble as China. Okay? When you start to hear me talk about it in my own words, the United States government over 10 years keeping quantitative easing going only did as much as China's doing in 1 year to keep this going, to keep this Ponzi scheme going. And there's no way out. They can't back out, because they back out, the whole thing will collapse. Now at this point, they have to keep it going. So this year they're doing more and more stimulus in order to feed that, like from that central core. Picture that's the heart, feeding the blood out through the circulatory, blood being the money, out through the circulatory system to all of these zombie companies and stuff that are not really keeping their head above water. They're not productive. They're non-productive companies, but they do produce products and stuff. And they rely, China, in order to keep all of this going, relies upon their trade surpluses. What they do is they draw money in by buying products cheap from these countries that are like India and these different countries that supply them with raw materials to build things with very cheaply. And then what they are able to do is use those products to produce products with these zombie companies. And the zombie companies do produce products and stuff, but they rely upon that trade surplus in order to keep all of this knitted together and going. So what's happening now? In my own words, I'm putting all this in my own words. What's happening now is that surplus that comes in, it's been keeping all of this going, suddenly is drying up really fast, because the biggest customer for them all, for these trade surpluses and stuff, is the United States. Donald Trump's coming in there, and all of a sudden, the pipe that carries that money in, that trade surplus money, Donald Trump has taken a big cork and jammed it into the pipe. It's called a trade war. Okay? That's why you're seeing the Baltic Dry Index fall off right now. And China, suddenly, factory production's dropping like a stone. Now they say they got like, what was it, 6.7% or something GDP? Nobody believes those numbers. In truth, if you were to add those numbers together for say like 8 years, or let's say 16 years, it would mean the whole China would double. Everything would have to be double in like 16 years. That kind of growth is phenomenal. It's off the charts. Does anybody really believe that China's actually even growing at all right now? I think per myself that they reached their peak a while ago, and right now they're actually, everything's shrinking, even though they're still feeding all this zombie money in for infrastructure programs, shadow banking system, on and on and on. $3 trillion a year. This is a mess. In my own words, to finish this program off, this is a mess. And anything like this trade war, if it continues, could set it off. But not that. There's other things in the world economy right now that could set it off. Meanwhile, we got Italy. She's the old lady in the chair. She might be there for another 2 years, just sitting there panting for air and still on her respirator or whatever it is, and still continuing to keep going. Because Italy, even though it's a huge problem, it could take down the world economy by itself, Italy's being fed by the European Central Bank. I mean, let's face it, their bonds, the 30-year bonds. Somebody came into the rescue just now and bought like $40 billion worth of them. Who would want to buy Italian bonds right now with Italy in the financial problems that they're in? What real investor would want to buy that? Somebody's buying it, and it's keeping Italy going. It's keeping their bond prices down. Because if Italy's bond prices go over 7%, you know, Italy's toast. And as long as their bonds stay low, as long as the bond yields stay low in Italy can refinance and keep refinancing their own corrupt banking system that basically is got non-performing loans up to here. Oh, I should say here, and they're breathing through their nose. Their non-performing loans are up to here, and they're breathing through their nose right now. But they're just staying afloat. They're barely staying afloat. Italy's sinking. Now, we got Deutsche Bank sinking, and we got the Brexit coming up, you know, on the 29th of March. World economy is not what it appears to be to everyone. You know, everybody thinks that we're in an economic recovery or whatever. There is no economic recovery. We're in a mess. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you in the next show. Bye-bye.